Imagine a walk through the park. Nature is all around. Birds are singing their songs. The air smells so fresh. A stream babbles in the distance, and the rustling of leaves can be heard above. But as the night approaches, this place becomes eerie. Silhouettes appear among the trees, and the crunch of a stick is heard somewhere. And then, suddenly it begins to rain. It was on such a night that a nightmare unfolded in Among Green Trees National Park, a nightmare its workers will remember for the rest of their lives. Hi everyone, that's Black here, and welcome back to my Game Corner. Today I'm here reviewing a fairly new game, which I also noticed back when its demo was released. Funnily enough, I never played the demo, so Last Report opened up to me as a completely new game just a couple of days ago. I wanted to review it back in summer, but something didn't work out, so I only got to it now. So what is Last Report? Last Report is a game released on July 11th, 2025, developed and published by Monopixel Games. You take on the role of a nighttime park ranger. Your task is simple: sort reports of park rule violations. As the night progresses, terrifying events begin to unfold, leading to a terrible tragedy. But first things first. The game begins with us arriving for our night shift as a park ranger at the national park. We've had a 2-week vacation and now we have to return to work. The dark night is restless and the rain pours outside. The first thing we do after our vacation is check the guidebook, which contains the park rules and a short guide on how to play. While we're reading, someone suddenly knocks on the door. It turns out to be John, our friend who also works as a park ranger. However, if we're sitting in the cabin and doing everything on the computer, John is forced to patrol the park at night. Our friend brings us coffee and asks us to give the keys to a new colleague who would be stopping by later. This is when our work actually begins. We take the report from the big pile, check the sectors, check whether it was made after the 10th of January, and then we put it into the computer, where we use a special program to select the violation indicated in the report. If the report is defective, we shred it. This is how our entire work will proceed: sipping coffee, sorting reports. After a while, Henry, the new guy who moved here with his wife for peace and quiet, comes to visit us. The boy, like us, works inside the cabin and takes the keys for it. It's also worth noting that John said that sometimes the power can go out because it hasn't been fixed yet. That's why the lights flicker and the appliances shut off from time to time. And this will indeed happen in the game in some specific situations. As John says, you just have to wait a little and everything will start working again. After submitting a few reports, we get a call from our friend Caroline on the walkie-talkie. This is her last shift. She's transferring to the research center and won't be our colleague anymore. She says that this is where her future lies. Well, why not? Good luck to her. Sometime later, one of the park workers who's repairing the tower in sector A22 calls us. He asks us to check if it's working. All these situations really create an atmosphere. Work is in full swing all around us. We're here warm and cozy, and someone else is also outside doing their job. It's an unusual cozy feeling. However, our peaceful work is interrupted by a strange rustling sound outside. A silhouette appears in the doorway, scurrying away as soon as we catch it. At this point, things become uneasy, but maybe there is some explanation and everything's okay, right? Right? No way. A short while later, John comes in and reveals the source of the sound. The man had set a bear trap in front of the cabin entrance. How creepy. A little later, John calls us with another eerie piece of news. Grandfather of the forest, Douglas, has disappeared. His shift was supposed to end an hour ago and he still hasn't returned. On the other hand, maybe he was just wandering through the forest again. In fact, that turns out to be almost true. Douglas pops in to see us in a short time later. He says he encountered a bear in the forest. You have to be careful with animals like that. Everything would be fine, but the conversation with Douglas reveals unexpected events from past years. It turns out that about 25 years ago a murder took place in this very cabin. Someone or something killed a worker here, and the strangest thing was that the body seemed to be alive. It tried to crawl towards the door, writhing like a snake, but the man was definitely dead. The situation was hushed up back then though, so no one talks about it. Also, a few minutes before talking to Douglas, we come across a rather sad report. The photo shows a deer killed by someone. Well, it's wildlife. Yes, it's creepy, but still, these things happen, so I didn't put much attention to it. Well, anyway, let's get back to work. Whoa, is that a corpse? A dead body, and it's not an animal, it's a human! At this point, things start to escalate rapidly. Among the usual reports, some creepy and strange ones start appearing. For example, one report warns us that something is nearby, and BAM! The door opens and some creature runs past the window. More dead bodies. Even the computer is glitching, causing the human test to change and take the same eerie hue. One thing is clear, we're all in danger. A few will survive this night. However, we must continue working, even with danger all around us. Someone's knocking on the window, reports show mutilated corpses, and people are calling for help on the walkie-talkie. The situation is heating up. And then the creature that recently crawled onto the roof of the cabin gets inside. A flashlight doesn't help fend off the entity, but a couple of bullets from Douglas's shotgun save us. It turns out that the same thing had happened 25 years ago, so Douglas already knows what to do. But we have to keep sorting through the reports, because according to the legend, the heart of the anomaly can be found among them, and only by destroying it can everything be restored to normal. And then some doctor calls us and gives us a bunch of strange files. Some of them don't work properly, some are password protected, nothing makes sense. However, the files talk about Emily, a 7-year-old girl who was lost. Funnily enough, Emily also visits us a couple of times, but her personality isn't really explored. Only one thing is clear, she's with these monsters. The situation is becoming completely confusing and strange. There is something odd everywhere. Bodies, monsters in silhouettes, that girl, the computer is catching some horrible viruses again, and then suddenly Henry calls us. He's clearly injured, but he says he'll come to us because he has something terribly important to tell. Another report of corpses suddenly teleports us back in time, to a memory before a vacation. Honestly, you should have heard me at that moment. At first I thought this whole nightmare was just a dream, that's how shocked and confused I was. But in the end, it turned out that, unfortunately no, it wasn't a dream. Things only get worse, and Henry comes inside and ends up being terribly wounded, practically dying. The last thing he manages to say is that the creature is coming and we must agree to its deal, otherwise everyone will die, after which he falls dead on the desk. Interestingly, the next report says that the corpses are moving. Well, wonderful, that's exactly what I wanted to hear after one of them just fell on my desk. Actually, I was expecting a jump scare from this corpse right up until the last minute, but unfortunately there won't be one. Oops. John also calls to say that we won't see him alive again because the monsters have caught up with him, and so we lose our second friend. Honestly, it's a really creepy part. Someone dies on the other end of the line and you can't do anything. All that remains now is to get to the end. We may not have managed to save them, but it's never too late for the revenge. The creature really is getting to us. It's angry that people are damaging the forests, burning trees, littering nature. However, the creature can vanish if we complete the last report. Of course, we agree, hoping that it will at least help somehow, and we find ourselves in the void, the place between life and death, where that same guy who died 25 years ago lives. Which means we, too, are dead. At the end we see ourselves in reality. The walkie-talkie is beeping, and we lie motionless. My retell of the story may have seemed chaotic and overly packed, but that's exactly how the game feels. There are no long pauses between situations. Everything happens so quickly it's breathtaking. After playing, I spent another 20 minutes trying to process the emotional roller coaster ride the game gave me. In fact, towards the end I began to notice and sense that the story would be the weakest part of this game, and essentially I was right. As soon as I recovered from the emotional storm of the game's events, questions began popping up in my head. Questions I'll never get anywhere near the answers to. The plot is essentially simple. Standard, even for a small horror game. We start off quietly at work and suddenly something terrifying begins to happen. It turns out that some monster wants to kill everyone and we're obligated to save people. However, there are many small moments in the game that strike me as odd. Questions that remain unanswered. Who is Emily? Why is she mentioned a couple of times and then she disappears from the plot like a ghost? Who is this doctor? What was that broken video footage anyway? What was the point of the moment with the flashlight and the creepy creature? In short, there are a lot of questions and no answers. Some of these jump scares are designed specifically to create immediate discomfort for the player. The funny thing is, it works. When you're immersed in the game, every event truly evokes emotions. The game is filled with a variety of jump scares, simply terrifying and tense moments. In an hour and a half, the game manages to grip the player's emotions so well that I can't help but notice. Some of these are standard cheap jump scares like sharp and loud jump scares. Others feature mysterious, disturbing events, and others are downright surreal and leave you speechless. And it all happens so quickly that you don't have time to reflect on each new moment. With all that said, I'd like to point out that this is the first horror game I can call cozy. Unexpected, huh? Horror games are usually supposed to be terrifying, making the player shudder and flinch at every unfamiliar sound, especially when you're trapped in a small, confined space. There is no room to turn away, and if someone enters, you're essentially trapped with no way to escape. So why does Last Report feel so cozy? Being in the ranger's cabin, I felt warm and cozy throughout the game, even when the door opened or someone entered. The feeling of not being alone, given at the beginning of the game, seemed to save me from the general fear. Let me explain. Often in horror games, we're the only sane participant of the events. Everyone around us is more likely our enemy, and the outcome depends on us. Sometimes, of course, you have a team around you, but more often than not, they are either controlled by you, the player, or they are utterly useless and unable to protect you. In Last Report, you're never alone. John and Douglas patrol outside, Henry is sorting reports in a nearby cabin, and other workers are also wandering the forest. And suddenly, you're a part of a whole team. More than once, outsiders save us from a certain death. This is where you get the connection with the characters. They begin to feel like genuinely close people, like a team whose well-being you genuinely care about, especially if you're involved. This makes the moments with the deaths of close friends evoke emotions, especially the moment with John, who dies off-screen, revealing only part of what's happening. The inability to do anything, to help in any way, creates the sense of despair, and overall the game copes with this. I completed the game and earned all the achievements in 3 playthroughs, and that was only because I failed the perfectionist achievement. The first time I delved into the game alone, late at night, in the dark, with a cup of tea. That's probably why the game felt so cozy. Some moments were genuinely scary, some were confusing, and others simply made me want to keep going to find out more. And while I liked the game overall, it didn't wow me. That's not to say it's a bad game, it's more like average. A standard short horror game that will give you a lot of emotions, but only once. If you want to support me with more than just liking and subscribing, consider checking out the link in the description. There you can donate any sum of money starting from $1. Any donation is appreciated. Thank you in advance. Now, it's worth noting the game's pros and cons. I'll start with the pros. Visual style and music. Bet and I both remarked that the music in the game is truly beautiful, especially during key plot moments. Otherwise, the soundtrack only reinforces and complements the atmosphere. The visual style, especially the style of the reports, is particularly beautiful. The black and white images with the blood so clearly visible in red look stunning, especially considering how beautiful that red catches the eye. The overall style of the game is quite somber, with more dull colors, with the exception of the reports, of course. And this lends the special surrealism to the reports. Atmosphere. The game truly nails its atmosphere and, thanks to its many small events, manages to evoke a storm of emotions. This also is a wonderful distraction from its cons. Gameplay. Overall, the core gameplay concept is reminiscent of those paper-please type games crossed with I'm an observation duty, where you check document data against what's supposed to be and then decide what type of violation it is. The work may sound a bit monotonous, but with the variety of reports, it actually becomes incredibly engaging. A variety of jump scares and events. The game has a ton of jump scares, all of them different and therefore terrifying. It's important to note that most of the time, at their core, they're simply sudden creepy images accompanied by loud sounds, which is a cheap trick I'm not a fan of. However, here they occur not only inside the cabin, but also inside the computer, the reports, even the human test. I like this variety, as well as the fact that not every jump scare here is a jump scare with a loud sound. Some evoke creepy feeling simply because of their presence. For example, the creatures inside and outside the cabin are frightening because they suggest impending danger, although they don't always appear with a sudden creepy image. Okay, now let's move to the cons. You might think that there aren't many, but trust me, they're incredibly significant, and they make the game crumble like a house of cards. The plot. This is the weakest part of the game. It's painfully crude and even boring. It doesn't grab you. It becomes expected and predictable, especially if you're not really drawn into the action. Of course, everything will start off peacefully and then something terrible will happen. Oh, yeah, how scary. Never seen anything like this before, and here it is again. And of course, we are the chosen one, and the creepy creature will come to us and force his damn last report on us. So we'll make it, yeah. And the creepy creature initially wants to kill humanity and then insist on being exhalated through the report. How logical. There are so many unanswered events. Who the hell is Emily? Why the hell is the shredder breaking? What were those files from the doctor? Why do I need that flashback? And so many more questions that I'll never get answers to. I don't know, it's a real problem for me. Many incidents are simply done to evoke emotions and seem to have no basis. It's like the developers wanted to cram everything at once. Also, the scene with the creature inside the cabin when you shine the flashlight is incredibly drawn out, which immediately ruins the atmosphere of the moment. The events were just for the sake of it. I'll mention the bodies can move bit right away. It's not really that scary, but rather makes me wonder why I need this information right now, and not after the body disappears, perhaps to further fuel my emotions. Basically, it's needed to justify the body's disappearance later, but honestly, it's just so-so. Considering there wasn't even a jump scare. A choice without a choice. It might seem like there are two endings to the game, because we can either accept or reject the last report. However, if you reject it twice, after death you'll end up back where you were before, and get the same ending as if you'd accepted the last report. Which begs the question, what's the point of the choice then? Why couldn't they have two different endings? We don't even have a hole in our head here, so what's this all about? A watch? Excuse me, what is this? Why do I need this watch? What does it do plot-wise? What will it give me? No, well, it will give me an achievement, that's cool, sure, but what the hell is this? Why introduce something that ultimately adds literally nothing to the player or the story as a whole? So, what do we have here? Overall, it's a decent game for a one-night stand that delivers a big dose of emotions. While the storyline is a bit lacking, it won't be noticeable the first time you play, especially once you've gotten into the swing of things. It's not exactly good, but I won't call it bad either. Honestly, I expected something worse, and overall I was satisfied with what I saw. Whether it's worth the money is entirely up to you, but I honestly recommend playing the demo first. I don't know how much it compares to the finished product, but I think it might give you a better understanding of the overall game. In any case, I personally think that the game could be improved. And for now, it's falling short of being anything more than okay. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to like this video and write a comment. Subscribe if you haven't already and ring the bell button. Have a nice one. Bye.